Today is Tuesday, the 3rd of March 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory boards. Right, so yesterday I set up the overarching risk for the week, which is velocity, right? So the times are changing and things are moving faster than ever. So today the risk shows up as a paperwork, right? So yesterday we mentioned about things actually in terms of disclosures, but today we are going to look into how often we think the risk is a missing disclosure. So the bigger risk is missing the signal, right? So because the signal is buried under disclosure. Now, and when we talk about signal, what we're talking about, this is the things that we're going to discuss today. And there is some interesting things actually I would like to mention. And by the way, I have an examples here almost addressed on the public listed companies in the UK, but the mechanics in terms of disclosures, reporting, and data sets lives with every single company in the world. It doesn't matter if you're a large organization or a solopreneur. The point here is to understand what is going on, what are the mechanics, and the reasons why. Because you have these mechanics, these methodologies, these frameworks, and you apply it to any organization, and there is an immediate return on that investment into think about these things and apply them. And the reason why is valuation. When you have a repeatable business, a documented business, a business that have certain amount of predictability and evidence of that, your valuation multiples increase right away. So the conversations that you have with your investors, your shareholders, your banks, other institutions, merger and acquisitions, and you name the list goes on and on and on. When you have all these systems, and system is not necessarily software, by the way, is the system is the flows, the standard operation procedures, delegations matrix, or the triage, so who we have to be called when and why, and which is the hierarchy of escalation, etc., etc. So if you put some thinking about this and you start to document it, even if your company is 10 employees, or your company is a large organization with 1,000 employees with presence in the world, this start to increase the multiple of the valuation of your company. And many people believe that is revenue and EBITDA. But guess what? Capital, and I talked about this entity, which is capital, follows predictability and optionalities, meaning that actually things that actually you have options, because and an option, I'm going to explain this in a second, and predictability. So things that you say, oh, this is coming from here, have been documented here, can be transferred to our next team or the next person in the succession line. Or if you bring somebody out for outside the organization, they already have all the foundations to keep growing the organization, scaling, etc., etc. And in terms of optionalities, what I'm trying to say, or I'm saying, is that you have the capacity now in twofold. So pick which are going to be your partners or alliances and distribution systems, and also who is going to be the people who's going to help you, right? So it's people that you're allied to scale and grow, or people who's going to help you, for example, capitals, funders, investors, etc., etc. So when you have the capacity or the options to say who I'm going to work with, is a luxury that many companies don't have today. Now, I'm going to show the model that I'm using, by the way. So I've been sharing this before, but in this model that you see here, I'm going to focus in the section below, which is the systems, the controls and resilience. And this is where the velocity happens. Because if you don't have enough documentation to support your company, what you do, how you do it, and remember, this applies to everybody, any single enterprise in the world, is a public listed company or is an employee of 15 employees, applies for everybody, believe it or not, because the principles is exactly the same. So you have your performances, your governance, risk, and compliance, and we're going to tap into this, and your assets, right? So I leave the model there so you can see where I'm navigating this conversation. Now, Back to the public companies, the quote companies alliance numbers are the one line that should make you gasp, right? Because the average annual report is in the region of 98,000 words. And this is for public listed companies. 98,000 words, the annual report. And just to give you context what this means, you say, okay, fine, but just to give you context. So if you enjoy reading, this is actually company annual reports, right? So you can imagine the amount of data, information, and things are in there. So let's put that in context. How many 98,000 words mean? It's a full book. And I give you a few names of literature that you can relate to how big these annual reports are. Life of Pi, if you know that name, that book from Jean Martel, average 98,000 words, depends on translation or the geography where it's published. The Hunger Games, that actually have a full franchise of movies by Susan Collins, 98,000 words. If you go into more literature, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, 98,000 words. The Hobbit, if you are in fantasy entertainment, by J.R.R. Tolkien, is a full movie, 3 hours movie out of that book, 98,000 words, right? So you can imagine a book like this that you take perhaps a good month to read through in your spare time, but you have to do this for your board meetings to read this information. And you say, well, it doesn't apply to me because actually we are not that big. Our annual reports are a few pages, etc. You have to look into this not as a literature, really, as a, oh, we have a template, we have this, we have that. Yes, it's many times is the case. But remember what I said at the beginning. This is very important because it's your asset, it's your data set, it's something actually investors are going to read, shareholders are going to read, stakeholders with the right authorizations are going to read, business plans are discussed there, and actions and evidence are provided through this report. So again, if you are not doing it already in this organized way, or you are doing it already in this organized way, so treat it as a data set, as an asset, not as something that actually, okay, we have to do this report and we are fine. So if your oversight relies on human reading and reading everything, you have designed fragility because this is too much information to read. And you say, we are a small company, we don't have to. I probably have to challenge that concept because you might not have that documented as your own data set of the information to read. But for example, if you are a company that is doing maintenance services to building properties or for properties or portfolio for property, I am 100% sure that you, your team, or somebody in your organization have to read many compliance requirements in terms of health and safety, fire safety, visibility, cleanness, you name it. So it's a full list of things that you have to read, and you have to document that somewhere. So you may say, well, we don't have a company pack in terms of what we do. You should, because you have all that information that you are processing, implementing in a workflow of your teams to service other companies, and there is no process or documentation that show how your company identified the risk, where is the evidence, and how you create your processes and systems. And I'm thinking in workflows, how you organize your team, your roster, etc., emergency codes and documentation of reports. And this is an intellectual property of your company. So it's an asset that you have there, right? So they say, well, we have our system to record everything, etc. So how fast is transferable to somebody else? That is part of your board pack too. So then look at the direction of travel from the code, right? So because where is the code going? So provision 29 expects a board declaration over material internal controls for 2026 starting date. So this year, I think it's February, last month. So provision 29 expects a board declaration over material internal controls. This is exactly what I just mentioned 2 seconds ago. So it's by law, if you may, that is already a requirement to do this. And say, well, it doesn't apply to us. Yes, it doesn't apply to you, but remember what I said. Leverage. If you start to document these things, your valuation multiples start to increase by 2 or 3 times. And you might say, well, I'm not interested because we have revenue and EBITDA to do evaluation. But remember also the capital is looking for things that actually are predictable, are repeatable, and can be transferred to other organizations if, or the banks or the investors or the people are providing the loans to your organization in terms of growth or expansion and whatever is the case, they will look into that very closely and say, do you have a company that actually have many things documented in a way that actually, if we have to take it over, then we have a repeatable model that anybody else can run. And that increase your chances, reduce your capital cost, and increase your valuation too. So let's approach this as an asset problem, and today's lens is mostly the data assets. So you either own a decision grade data system or you own a document factory, right? So 3 problems that we have mentioned already is the amount of words that this report requires, 98,000 words, and has publicly challenged the burden. And this is by the already listed in the Alliance report. The board, number 2, we mentioned already, is the board is being asked to stand behind controls now, not anecdotes. So the UK Corporate Governance Code also in 2024 strengthens expectation of monitoring and reviewing material controls, including reporting controls, right? We mentioned provision 29 here. And in terms of regulators are pushing for better, not longer. And this is where we get the quality. So the Financial Reporting Council Corporate Governance Reporting Review flags recurring weakness and issued updates from the guidance of strategic reports in February 2026, last month. So we have to do this better. So the direction of travel I mentioned is clarity. So don't make a big volume of information. Make it more sharper, specific, evidence-based. So in other words, imagine a board pack or your documentation that grows every quarter is like a dashboard with 20 different speed dials, just only speedometers. So you feel informed, as actually we at different places, location, we have different speeds, but you stop driving because you cannot watch every speedometer in your dashboard. And I'm talking about speed because the things are moving fast. So as a board advisor, what I would propose to consider is the following. Number 1, define the golden thread of data. So identify the 10 metrics that explain performance, risk and controls, and keep them stable for 12 months so trend beats noise. So what I mean is actually, if you have your 10 metrics on the page, 10 metrics, and you recurrently watch these metrics, you will start to see what are the trends. So you avoid the noise of narratives, because words can be very good, can be very explanatory, can be very descriptive, but you need core data to make decisions. And we're going to talk about the board's requirements in these cases later on. Number 2 is build a controls view, not a narrative dump, as I mentioned. Yeah, one page that shows controls health across finances, operations, reporting, and compliance, all aligned to the code's focus on material controls. And here's the keyword: is a code already, right? So you don't have to look, you have to do an assessment of your organization against the code and say what applies and what doesn't apply, right? Though you already have a guidance there, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's the point here. Don't invent the wheel. Do a material assessment of your organization, put it against the code and say what applies, what doesn't apply, and then from there you have your guidance, right? And suggestion number 3, use an advisor board as a filter. That's my expertise. Don't use extra weight. Give a small group of specialists the job of scanning the pack, your weak signals, and presenting a one-page challenge log, if you may, back to the statutory board. So you have a group of experts, and I put together international experts where you can change it or interchange them as the things are shifting in the business, the model, the economy, the technology, or the socials. environments, right? So I mentioned last week about all these three things, or early this week too. Technology change, like AI today is a big challenge. I'm going to mention AI tomorrow in detail. Um, the socials change because the people want remote working. There are countries proactively promoting nomad visas. So people go and can go for 90 days, a year, whatever is the case, to work remotely from different countries. So the social environment that you're living today is completely different from 5 years ago. And all this has an impact in the productivity, in the reporting, in the attrition of your employees and your best people, etc., etc. So here's where boards get stuck. So you want to be transparent, so you add more words, but then you add a new risk section, then a new ESG section, then a new set of control commentary. So the pack becomes kind of a compliance repository, a big warehouse of information rather than something that is actionable. So instead, I would suggest to treat information like a product, right? So products have users. Users have a job to do. And so, I mean, the board. So the board job is simple: decide, allocate, and intervene. So when we talk about the information of the board packs, it's just to give the board the information to decide, allocate, and intervene. It's not a companion, a novel. Like we mentioned, 98,000 words is a full novel. You take a month to read that. So that is why the golden thread matters. Remember the golden thread I mentioned? It is also consistent with the Financial Reporting Council message on practical, proportionate reporting in its strategic report guidance updates. So as you see, everything is start to be aligned. You have guidance. You do a materiality analysis to see what applies and what doesn't apply to you, and you already have your milestones, your foundation, and from there you build based on your company requirements and needs, or strategies, or plans, etc., etc. So now, where does my advisory model fit here? This is exactly the sort of work where one executive hire is too slow and too narrow. So if you're looking into, say, we need an expert in this area, so we are going to look and to go to the market or to an agency and hire somebody. That could be a few weeks, a few months in many cases, could be a few thousands or a few hundred thousands of cost to hire one person. So you just need a reporting specialist, a control specialist, maybe a former auditor, a data governance lead, and a communications brain who understands market reaction. So, but I build international advisory boards for a 6-month sprints, right? So they are swappable. So we can look into the expertise that you need now, and then 6 months later say, okay, this expertise is not required anymore, but it's the other expertise is required now. So we're going to bring in the next 10 days this next expert at zero cost. It's already part of the board advisory process that I have put together. So they are scoped. So they exist to compress time, right, to you, to your organization, and we can put advisory boards for companies in around 20 employees, 25 employees, with revenues up from £5 million all the way upwards. And you say, how much is it going to cost? Not a lot. Believe it or not, it's not a cost issue. It's the velocity issue that you need to look into here. So what do you gain working with me? 3 things: outcomes, differentiators, and risk reductions. In terms of outcomes, a board pack redesigned that turns reporting inflation into a stable golden thread and controls the view the board trusts aligned to UK reporting expectations. Now, I mentioned a lot of UK because I work a lot in UK, but guess what? Every country in the world, regardless, have their own frameworks, their own legal requirements, their own compliance requirement, their own frameworks, their own return of information to the government's compliance offices, etc., etc. So this is applicable to any organization across the world. You just look into the information that is required from your organization, put it together, you have your foundation, and then from there you make a decision. In terms of differentiator, I use a governed advisory board blueprint to create a repeatable filter. So the charter, the scope, the cadence, and the escalation path. So insights lines where the action happens. This is not something actually, oh, we have to review it in the next quarter meeting. It's escalation path, so you can bring it right away to the people that need to make decisions. And in terms of risk reduction, you reduce the chance of missing weak signals because the pack becomes a decision grade and you build the evidence that trail that provision 29 style declarations require. And I said provision 29 style because actually as mentioned earlier, every country in the world have their own requirements and declaration requirements. So if you want a quick self-test, ask your audit chair. And if you don't have your audit chair, whoever is doing this function, what are the three metrics, only the three metrics in our pack that if they move, we intervene immediately as a decision-making committee, organization, or board. So if you don't have a clean answer about this, probably you have a lot of noise. You don't have really a board pack that actually, or a data set that allows you to have these processes at a speed that the business needs today. So one action you can take home today, and it's doable in 30 minutes or less, pick 10 golden threads metrics. Remember the golden thread matrix that I mentioned earlier, and move them to page 1, so at the top, with the last quarter, this quarter, and the trend for the following, for the rest of the year or the coming years. If you don't have these 10 golden threads, remember that we mentioned it is to follow these every single month, then probably you have something that is quite a lot of literature, if you may, but not a lot of actions. And you have to dig into pages and pages of information to understand what exactly you have to do and when. So let's pause here today and reconvene tomorrow, because yesterday, I remember we mentioned velocity as a risk. Today, we talk about the board packs and the amount of words and things that you have to read to find information to make a decision or to find out more what is the next steps. And tomorrow, we talk on one of the fastest one of all, which is AI and the cyber risks. And I promised yesterday and today about AI. I couldn't do it today because I wanted to set the foundations first, because AI, some companies are treating AI and they don't realize they are increasing the risk rather than helping the task of their teams and their company overall. So if you are a board member or a leader and you want a B team advising on your board packs and data assets, set up a 30-minute call so I can understand your position and how an independent international advisory board looking from the outside in your organization can help you and your team without stepping on your toes, without the traditional consulting overhead, and without the public theater. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, and bye-bye.